Welcome, happy hump day. How y'all doing? Jake Lapin here along with my co-host Julian McKenzie. Julian, how's your week going?
My week, I'm surviving. I'm holding on. I've worked a little bit. I've had a few days off. It's been an easier week than some other weeks I've had. So you know what? I'm cool. I'm cool. How's your week been?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. I'm working at MLB Network at a very exciting time because it's near the end of July. You know what that means? Trade deadline coming up. Some deals already, some more rumors brewing about. We're going to talk about all of it, and we're going to start with some grades for some trades that have done so far. And the first one, Julian, I want to talk about is the defending champion Chicago Cubs dealing for Jose Quintana, arguably the best starter on the market, probably the best lefty starter on the trade market. What do you think about that trade? First for the Cubs, and then we'll talk about the White Sox.
I like this trade for the Cubs. This was a team that kind of started so-so to the year, and really they're just trying to keep pace. And, I mean, they gave up a few, younger players, and I will talk a bit more about the haul that the White Sox have been able to get through this trade and another trade they're able to make in the last 24 hours. But in this market right now, I think Quintana, being the great starter that he was, he had an outstanding start for the Cubs. This is a guy who I think will definitely help them out in the postseason, and I think the Cubs still have a chance to make it that far. That's a move you have to make, especially as the defending champions. I don't really have a problem with it. I guess I'm going to mark it just like, a B, even like a B plus, really. I mean, we're not talking about like them like trading for like Bryce Harper, but I mean the fact that you're able to get the top prize in the market, and I mean, fine, you sacrifice a little bit in the future. The Cubs are built to win right now. This isn't going to be that much of a dent in their pipeline. This is a big trade for me. This is a good trade.
Yeah, I think to the surprise of many, the Cubs were struggling going into All-Star break. 5.5 games back of the Brewers, already now within 2. So clearly they did something right here. Look, they were playing under 500 baseball for the first half of the season, which is just unthinkable when you think of on the pace they were on last year, and of course finishing it off with that World Series. But the rotation has been very disappointing, and that was by far and away their number one need. The lineup is still pretty stacked. They got a few MVP guys there. Chris Bryant left today's game, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But assuming he's okay, that lineup is good to go. It's all about the rotation. Lester's not having a great year. Arrieta, this guy was unstoppable. A Cy Young a couple years ago. You haven't heard his name once all season.
Fallen off. It's ridiculous. That's so weird how that is. This is a guy who was like arguably the best in the game, the best in the National League, and his form has just kind of fallen off. He's average at best. It's ridiculous.
Resorting back to what he was earlier in his career, much to the dismay of Cubs fans. And not only that, but he can walk after this year. The great part about bringing in Quintana is he's not a rental. Quintana is under control for the next few years. So the Cubs have him to compete this season and the next few seasons. Look, they obviously have a window that they're trying to keep open that they just opened a couple years ago. And no one thought it'd be closing this early. But the fact that they're bringing in a starter that they have control of for multiple seasons does not hurt that at all. I'm giving this a straight-up A for the Cubs. As for the White Sox, pretty clear what they're doing now, especially with another trade that happened last night, and that is Todd Frazier, Daniel Robertson, and a couple others to the Yankees in exchange for some solid prospects. The White Sox now have 10 prospects in the top 70 of MLB's ranked 100 prospects. That's more than, I think, like 7 or 8 teams combined. Yeah, so clear what the White Sox are doing. How do you feel about them cleaning house?
They're not a team that was going to be competitive for this year, and they're clearly in a rebuild. And I think if you're able to amass those types of prospects rated so highly, it's not going to hurt you. The fact that they were able to get these prospects and deals with the Cubs and the Yankees, that's full marks to them. I give the rebuild so far A. Chicago White Sox are building for that future. They were able to get some decent pieces in both deals. You have no complaints from me there. I think the White Sox are doing the right thing.
Yeah, this was a long time coming. I think Chris Sale was the first giant domino to go, and Quintana's name was on Lots of trade rumors even before the season started. So it makes sense to me at the All-Star break, White Sox with the worst record by a good amount, actually, in the American League. They're not competing this year. They're not competing next year or the year after that either. I think they have to do – I think the only option from them, as I think they've also admitted to, is that they got to go full rebuild, get rid of almost pretty much anyone that you have with that you can get anything for in return, as long as you don't think that they'll be nearly as effective in the next 3 to 4 years minimum. I think it's time to call out the dogs, ship everybody off, and I commend them for that. And the fact that they already have 10 prospects in the top 70 says a lot. Moncada is coming up tonight. We'll see how he does. I'm very intrigued to see what kind of ball player he turns into. But I'm giving an A- to the White Sox for doing this, and the minus is because they should have been doing this, I think, earlier, because they haven't been competitive in quite some time. Let's talk about the other team in that trade, though. That is the New York Yankees. Get this, Julian. The Yankees are currently sitting 4 games back of the Red Sox. They've actually fallen behind Tampa. After such a great start, they're still in the second wild card, but only by half a game. And they have the worst record in Major League Baseball since June 1st. So how do you feel about this trade for the Yankees?
They get themselves a reliever that's played for them before, David Robertson. One part of the trade that I think I'm not going to – I mean, well, here's how I feel about it, right? Todd Frazier. This is a guy who I think he's a really good hitter. And I mean, this is a guy who had 40 home runs last year. This year, 60. Not necessarily matching that pace. That being said, I mean, he wasn't playing on a great team this year. Maybe this is an opportunity for him to kind of jolt his numbers back up. And the Yankees needed a player like him in their lineup. I mean, obviously you have Aaron Judge who's holding up that load, but with a team that, as you mentioned, since June 1st, they're starting to kind of have that little lull in their game. Hopefully this is the wake up for Todd Frazier to be that bat. And if he ends up waking up for the Yankees, it's going to be a very interesting race in the AL East. I still think they could still hold on and manage to sweep away a wild card spot. Maybe the Red Sox have that division in tow right now, but I think the Yankees, with the talent they have, I really don't see them missing the playoffs. I give this move a B. I mean, I get a lot of people may have a little – I mean, look, Todd Frazier, I still think he's able to – kind of get back to pace. And I mean, this is a guy who had 35 home runs, 40 home runs, 29 in 2014. He's having a little bit of a down year, but I think him playing on a contender is going to revitalize him. And having David Robertson, having a really good reliever is going to help out their bullpen as well. The Yankees made themselves a really good deal yesterday, and it's going to help them get into the playoffs, I think. So this is a move that this is a really highly rated move, in my opinion.
I'm going with a B-, and I'll tell you why. I think the Yankees got off to such an amazing start that they raised expectations far beyond what they ever should have been for this team. Coming in to this season, I did not have the Yankees making the playoffs. I don't think a lot of people had the Yankees making the playoffs. They have some exciting young talent, but in the grand scheme of things, this was never about 2017 for them. Aaron Judge, Gary Sanchez going forward, that looks great. But I never saw 2017 being anything special for them. And now I don't think they're the worst team in baseball like they've played since June 1st, but I think they're just regressing to the mean, at least. This team is not that great to begin with. Their rotation is mediocre at best. Tanaka is their go-to guy, and he's not having a very good year. He's lost a lot of movement on his stuff. CC Sabathia has a good game every now and then, but far past his prime. Pineda is now getting Tommy John. He's out for the year and beginning of next year too. But the question is, Julian, is who are they really competing for that second wild card? And we'll get into this when we talk about who should be buyers and who should be sellers. But they're half a game up on Minnesota, who's playing way better than any of us could have imagined. And they just had a big series versus Minnesota. Seattle is playing some good ball right now, but Seattle, a game and a half behind the Yankees, is at 500. So there's a lot of teams still in the mix that are at or even slightly below 500. And you get into Kansas City, Texas, the Angels, even Baltimore and Toronto if you want to throw those guys out. But it's the fact that I think the Yankees might accidentally slide into the playoffs at this point, regardless of how poorly they play, as long as they can get out of being the worst team in baseball, which I imagine they will because they have too much talent to be playing this poorly as they have. But there's really no other team in there that truly scares me. Kansas City has been playing pretty well lately, and they were in the World Series only 2 years ago. It seems a lot longer than that. Obviously, they still have a lot of those pieces, but they have been a mediocre team ever since winning that championship, and I'm not sure they have enough to overtake the Yankees. But it wouldn't shock me at the same time. The way the Yankees are playing, it's hard to give them a bunch of support right now and a bunch of confidence. But I will say this. When the Yankees traded for Todd Frazier, I think they're going to play him at first base, which is good because they need a first baseman. They've tried a few guys. They've had some injuries. They've had Romine playing there, Jimon Choi, ever since they designated Chris Carter for assignment. And I know Chris Carter all too well from his Houston days.
So many people in New York complained about Chris Carter. It's hilarious. And I think they almost threw a parade when he was DFA'd.
What I was saying is they got Frazier, and that's not even the best piece for them because Betances and Chapman have been struggling so much. Their bullpen has been awful. They got rid of Clipper, who couldn't get anybody out this year, and they brought in Robertson, who's a great guy to have in the bullpen, and he's not even going to be in a closer role. They can use him in that Andrew Miller ace reliever whenever we need him, big moment of the game, bases loaded in the sixth. Okay, we can use Robertson because we know we have Chapman and Betances still behind him. Yeah. That was the biggest part of the trade, in my opinion, in terms of talent on their team. And I'll take it one step further. This is when it became a B- instead of a C+ for me because I don't think they're contending this year anyway. But the team ahead of them, and that's the Boston Red Sox, have been in talks about Todd Frazier for weeks. I mean, Ken Rosenthal at Fox had said Frazier to Boston was pretty much a done deal. And, we can get into, like, they said that about the Melo and Rockets, what's happening now kind of thing. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. But the fact of the matter is Boston's lineup from top to bottom is amazing. They have above average players at every single position right now except for third base. They're still suffering from that hole that Pablo Sandoval left them. They got rid of Travis Shaw. I bet they wish they could have him back right now. And Frazier was going to complete that lineup perfectly. And they took him off the board from their division rival. And that's why I think this move gets up to a B- for me.
One thing I'll say about the Yankees that I've also seen a lot of people go in on with that trade, I figured for a deal that was going to, involve a guy like Todd Frazier, highly touted in the market. Also, small side note, great point bringing up the fact that the Boston Red Sox were in on Todd Frazier. I also thought he was gone there. And for the Yankees to step up and make that move, you don't want a high piece like that going to a division rival, a team that's already up on you anyway. You don't want that. But one other thing, the Yankees deal away a prospect in Blake Rutherford. And there's already guys kind of like him in the system already, who are already out playing for the Yankees up at outfield. So I think one other thing I also liked is that, the Yankees didn't have to part with some young roster player now to make this trade happen. Rutherford probably wasn't going to get a lot of time with the guys in front of him. And Tyler Clippard, as you mentioned, wasn't having that great of a time for the Yankees. This deal could have gone a lot worse, in my opinion. They didn't have to, I feel as if the return could have easily been much worse in another year or another market for a guy like Todd Frazier. So I give the Yankees full marks for that, and I still think they can still make the playoffs with the roster they have. They just need to go on another good run, and Todd Frazier may need to wake up. And excellent point as well, bringing up the fact that David Robertson could play that role. He could play in the bullpen. But what's stopping them from getting another starter at this point? I mean, do you think they can go out and get a Sonny Gray, Marco Estrada? We could talk about the Blue Jays being a seller at some point as well. They could use a starting pitcher right now. And who's to say those two guys aren't up for them?
They're definitely going to be in talks, especially Sonny Gray talks. Their names already come up. It's just a matter of how much are they willing to give up for this season. I don't think they should be shipping off a lot of prospects they have hope for in the next year or two when I don't really like their prospect of actually making a title run this season. I think anything they do this season, I think they can hang on to that second wild card spot. I think they probably will. but I don't see them doing much more after that. And so the point is, how much are you willing to give up when this year is all about just letting the young guys see what you've got in the first place? That's why I don't think they should be in on every single guy whose name will pop up inevitably over the next week and a half. Let's move on to another move, and that was the Arizona Diamondbacks, suddenly in contention for the first time in a while, haven't made the playoffs since '09, I believe. Going after J.D. Martinez of the Tigers. What do you think of this move?
This is a good move for them. This is a team that has a pretty decent rotation. They find themselves in a spot where they can go for the playoffs. Why not go for it? Why not go out and get a guy like J.D. Martinez? He'll contribute some offense to them. 16 home runs, 39 RBI, same number of home runs as Todd Frazier, I should say. But I think he's going to be a welcome addition for Arizona. I like the move, getting yourself a nice bat. Yeah, I would rate it probably about like a B+. This is a guy who I don't think they'll necessarily count on him to be the guy. I mean, they already have a guy in Paul Goldschmidt. But, for secondary scoring in this case, can't go wrong with J.D. Martinez. This is a move that could very well get them into the playoffs as a wild card.
In pretty good shape in terms of the wild card right now. I don't see them catching the Dodgers. I don't see anyone really catching the Dodgers this year. But they are currently tied with Colorado Rockies, both in record and in terms of surprising me, Jake Lapin, in terms of having really good years out there in the National League West. As they sit right now, they are both tied, but Arizona's up 2 games in the loss column on Colorado. Mm-hmm. Chicago Cubs are next, 5.5 games back. I think you could also interpret that as the Milwaukee Brewers being 3.5 games back, if we all agree that Chicago is going to ultimately catch this young Brewers team, which I'm not saying is inevitable, but I think it's probable. But the thing that I like about this move, Julian, is that Arizona is second to last in all of baseball at hitting left-handed pitching. And they went out and got a guy for a reasonable price that can do just that. J.D. Martinez is very good at hitting all fields. He has almost as many home runs to right field as he does to left field. And that's just it's intriguing about him to me. So I think that was a good move by Arizona. And you look at this, I think they're pretty much bracing for the wild card, and you got to be prepared for all things in a one-game do-or-die scenario, which I think the MLB should probably get rid of, by the way. But that's for another day.
Come on.
You have Zach Greinke going out there, but if you face a lefty and you can't hit lefties in one game, your whole season is decided. So I think that was important that they addressed that, and they did just that. And I think this is the first of many dominoes to fall from Detroit.
Small side note, I know we don't want to spend too much time on this, but I love the fact that MLB has that one-game playoff in. Maybe just, remember that one game a few years ago, I think like the Rockies were in it, that sudden one-game playoff? Everyone loved that. And I get it, fine. You know what? Your season comes down to one game. I think that is amazing. The drama is heightened. It is there. It's outstanding. And over the last few years, we've seen some really good games in that spot. I think MLB has it right. That's one of the few things the MLB has right. I mean, their demos their demos for people watching are like so up there, like what, 40, 50-year-olds watching it. That is something as a young person I could really get into. Come on, that is awesome. Come on, don't shit on this, man.
A 162 game season, 162 games, and you're telling me one last game is going to decide your entire 162 games that you just played?
You want to go through a whole series?
Look at the NL Central.
4 more games?
They have 3 teams. Three teams win over 95 games, right? Pittsburgh's reward for winning 95 games is a one-game playoff. They won 97 games, 98 maybe even, and their reward is playing Jake Arrieta, the Cy Young, in a one-game do-or-die. That's bullshit, man. That is not fair. That is not in the spirit of the sport. There's a reason that they never play anybody one game at a time. Even in the regular season, there's always series. And now, when it matters most, you're going to just take that aspect of the game away. That makes absolutely no sense. We don't really have time for this.
I know, but the drama of a one-game playoff is so enticing and so great. Look at him, man. Look at Jake Lapin drinking the Gatorade because he's getting so amped up about this. Come on, come on. Anyway, we won't agree on that.
Let's get into a mandatory game for all sports talk shows at this time of year, and that is buyers or sellers. We're going to look at a few teams from around the league that are in questionable situations, either because they can compete this year, but they might not be able to, or they have some nice pieces that they could compete with in the near future, that they might want to hold on to. Each team has its own type of situation, and we're going to look at a few of the interesting ones, starting with your home country's team, Julian. That is the Toronto Blue Jays. Do you want to see them as buyers, sellers, or I guess which would be a very fair answer is neither?
I think the Toronto Blue Jays this year, it would be really sad if this happened, but I think they have to do this. I see them as sellers this year. I see them, I've seen the name Marco Estrada. His name has come up this year, even though he hasn't had the greatest year. Fans have been waiting for his game to show up for a good part of the year. Josh Donaldson's name has been in talks. He had a little bit of an injury scare last night against Boston, but he looks as if he's going to be okay. That being said, that seems to have been the case with a bunch of Jays players. It seems as if every time something will seemingly go right, someone may pick up a knock. But one name who I'm very curious about, and I've seen his name also being kind of thrown around, even though he's a young player, and I think it would serve the Jays a lot better if they kept him, is Roberto Osuna, their closer, who I don't know if you were following some of the story, but early on in the year, he dealt with some anxiety issues, and that seemed to have been a big story up in Toronto and how he was dealing with them. And all of a sudden, he turned into an all-star player, and he's one of their more reliable guys in their bullpen. And now, I mean, if you're looking to, go fully in a rebuild, I've seen his name kind of jump around here and there. You could potentially get quite a bit of a haul for the future. That being said, I don't know if it will make sense to me, but that is a name I'm going to follow around leading up to the trade deadline. All this to say, I think the Blue Jays are in a situation where they're not necessarily going to compete, and unfortunately for them, with how good the Yankees are going to be, with how good the Red Sox are right now, maybe this is time to shut down shop, retool, and then try to get better in a few years, which is really going to be unfortunate for all those Jays fans who went through all those years of missing the playoffs and being an afterthought, and then you have two of the best years they've had this century, back-to-back appearances in the ALCS, and the new management would have to tear it down. It's sad, but I think this is the year they're going to bring it down.
I don't want to see them break it down. I mean, we're talking about a team that is coming off of back-to-back trips to the ALCS, that close to the World Series. And look, they lost Edwin Encarnacion, they lost Michael Saunders. Those are two huge bats out of the middle of their lineup, all-star bats. But that lineup is still pretty stacked from top to bottom. They've had some injuries, I guess, with Travis going down, but you still have Jose Bautista, Troy Tulowitzki, Kendrys Morales still has some wood left in that bat. I'm confident in that. And Pierce is a good player. Pilar is a nice player. Donaldson was an MVP candidate last year. I mean, that's a great lineup that's been underperforming like crazy this year that I'm not ready to give up on just yet. And the pitching is where it gets a little trickier because you have a lot of what-if guys in that rotation that have been very good at some point in the last 3 years that maybe you just kind of had a perfect storm working for you. I know J.A. Happ has bounced around a lot, and he's not going to win nearly as many games as he did last year ever again in his life probably. Yeah. But if he's still a guy at the bottom of your rotation, he's more than serviceable, I think. You have Stroman, who could be a stud. You have Sanchez. If he can get healthy, he can be a stud. Estrada, you just don't know what you're going to get from him, but he's been good at times. I'm not ready to give up on this team. Look, they're 5 games back of the Yankees right now for the second wild card, which doesn't seem like that much, especially considering that hole they dug for themselves. The problem is there's 7 teams between them and the Yankees right now, so they don't have to play just better than the Yankees. They have to play better than 8 other teams. So that could be a little bit of an issue. But even if they don't make it this year, I would love to see them hang tight, hold on to everybody, and try again next year. Don't start off 15 games under 500 right off the bat maybe, and then you'll have a chance to compete at least for a wild card if you're not going to catch the Red Sox and inevitably Yankees. And look, those 2 teams are primed to be quite good for quite some time, so I'm not sure how many division championships you're competing for at the current strength, but I think it's worth giving it one more year to play that out before doing anything rash. I would hold on to those guys if it were me.
Fair. I admire your wonderful optimism. As a
I don't know. I just know there's something about liking and the way they've won in the ALDS back-to-back years versus the Texas Rangers. Maybe it's because I don't like the Texas Rangers, but I've enjoyed watching that team in the playoffs, and I don't feel like they ever got to finish off what they started, and I think it's just 1 year too soon to give up, if you ask me. Let's talk about the Cardinals and Pirates, getting into that Central Division, which has been so wacky this year. Obviously, the Brewers, like I mentioned earlier, 2-game lead on the Cubs. We're just waiting for that to change, but it hasn't yet. 2.5 games behind the Cubs is the Cardinals, and a half game behind them is the Pirates. Both sitting under 500 right now, but only by a game or two. Do you think these guys have any point in trying to compete in this year, going after any big name this year?
I like the Cardinals are one of those teams that it seems as if they're given some kind of inch, they can somehow take a mile. And I know maybe they're not nearly as good as some of the teams they've fielded in the past, but there's something about the St. Louis Cardinals that makes me feel like, if they get some players, they could find a way to kind of go back and forth with the Cubs. And I think as much as the Cardinals can be hated in some circles, the Major League Baseball playoffs will always be great. Or baseball is always fun when the Cardinals are competitive, I find. So I'd like to see them go for it. The Pittsburgh Pirates, I've seen Andrew McCutchen's name kind of thrown around as trade bait as well. They're a little farther back than the Cardinals are for that NL Central spot. They could technically, in theory, also go for it as well. I'm just not sure if they'd necessarily be good enough to compete. That being said, they did just get back Starling Marte. He looked like he had a decent outing yesterday, went 1 for 3, made a nice catch in the outfield as well. I'd like to see both of these teams just kind of go for it, as stacked as that NL Central is. I'd like to see both of these teams go for it.
This isn't a perfect analogy, but I think the Cardinals are a lot like the MLB's version of the San Antonio Spurs, in that
That's exactly what I was going to say.
They always make the right moves, and they somehow, even when you think, okay, now they're done. Duncan's gone. Pujols is gone. They're always relevant, and they're always competitive. And shockingly, this has been a year like, wow, take a step back. Maybe the Cardinals aren't always inevitably going to be a playoff team. And they're certainly not out of it at this juncture, and they have had some injuries. But I don't think they should go out and trade for some rental when they've proven year after year that they can just reproduce their own players from their own farm system. They're rarely huge buyers, and I don't think that should change this year, especially considering, regardless of how many games out they are, 4.5 right now, they are under 500. That's over half the season is gone and you're under 500. I think that's a pretty good sample size that, maybe we're not in position to go out and make big blockbuster moves because we just haven't played that well in well over half the season now. The Pirates are interesting because I think the only reason they are only half game back of St. Louis, but I think the only reason that they're even on this list is because Starling Marte is back, and you're getting back a dynamic talent, assuming that, maybe the PEDs or whatever he says he didn't know he was taking were really attributing how much to his game. I guess we'll never know. We're about to get sidetracked here, Julian, but I think it's a worthy sidetrack. Marte had an 80-game suspension, and he returned from it yesterday. But he played 12 games before that in the minor leagues, had 60-something at-bats? Are you okay with that? Does that really count as a suspension?
I mean, look. He didn't. He did his time. I mean, look. We can go on a whole tangent about PEDs and all that. He did his time. He served his suspension, and now he's back in the lineup. I don't know why. I don't really have a problem with him playing all those minor league games. That being said, I guess I understand why that would be an issue. Maybe for a player who's been gone that long, I mean, for them to be eased into a lineup, I mean, a team naturally is going to do that. I don't know. I don't really have a problem with him playing those 12 games. Maybe, if anything, Major League Baseball should institute some kind of rule where you kind of give a player a cap. Like, you know what, if they're within these few games back from such a large suspension, you can allow them to play like 12, 15 minor league games. So that way they can come back and be ready. Or you can just drop the hard hammer entirely and just say, hey, you know what, you can't, do something like that. Play your minor league games after your suspension's over. But personally, I don't know if this is progressive of me thinking this way. I don't have a problem with him playing minor league games. He's not playing major league games. He's not necessarily hanging out in the clubhouse just playing. For a guy like that who's been gone half the year, he's obviously going to want his games in to do his thing. So I don't really necessarily have a problem with this. That being said, just looking at you right now, I feel as if you do.
I disagree with you pretty adamantly, as a matter of fact. If he played 12 games and it's not an 80-game suspension, it's a 68-game suspension. Look,
he didn't play them in Major League Baseball. He played them in the minors.
That's still baseball. It's still the Major League Baseball corporation hierarchy in which he's participating in. Look, that's not the point of punishing somebody. Isn't so that they can get ready to ease the punishment ahead of time. How is that? That's just making it a 68-game suspension. That makes no sense to me. And maybe I'm sensitive because this whole steroids era just completely ruined America's pastime as a sport for a long time. It lost a lot of fans along the way, that many of which have not returned. And now we have these punishments, and we're so forgiving of a lot of these guys. Look, there's a lot of guys playing now that were busted that we just don't even bring it up anymore, that they're still part of, they're back in the league and they're doing whatever. Look, this guy cheated. Whether he says he knew it or not, or whether he did actually know it or not, he did cheat. He made millions of dollars because of it. And now we're just going to be lenient and say, okay, and your suspension, we're going to let you off early for good behavior. I don't like it. If you're suspended for 80 games, you should not be playing baseball for 80 games. You should not be associated with the organization for 80 games. You got to stand pat. You got to be strong. You got to fight this. Otherwise, people are going to continue to do it, take their suspensions after they're already getting paid these $1 million contracts, and the sport will never totally recover from this entire mess. I know this is this one time, these 12 minor league games from Marte aren't what's ruining the sport, but it's just the principle involved that I don't like it. None of it sits well with me. It rubs me the wrong way.
I feel like this is spilling over into a whole thing about how we just treat steroid users, period, because there's a few guys who have been honest about what they've done, and, we've been kind of lenient over them. I mean, one guy, for example, who just immediately comes to mind, I mean, he's not a hitter. Andy Pettit was a guy who was pretty forthcoming about what he did. And, this is a guy who, fine, he did what he did, but no one's going to hate him for the rest of his life after it. Mark McGwire had a little bit of a period where people kind of soured on him, but then when he eventually came clean on it, he's fine with it. You know what? I mean, I get it. Maybe a slightly different situation, but I think the Major League Baseball, you could forgive and forget here. People are going to be lenient on the steroid era, and I get it. Why isn't Pete Rose the whole thing forgiven? It was so fun when they were on it. It was so fun. We had one of the most fun home run chases between two guys who were on that drug. At this point, come on, it's, I don't know. I get it. It's rooting some of the sanctity of the game, but damn, at the same time, I mean, it was so damn fun. Barry Bonds, right?
I'm not going to argue.
All these guys. What's the point of what's wrong with being lenient on this guy? Like I said, he didn't play 12 games in the major leagues. He played 12 games in a rehab stint for some minor league team, and fine, he's ready to go play for a Major League Baseball team. He playing those 12 games doesn't impact the Pittsburgh Pirates in any way. They don't get 5 wins because he played those games. Fine, let him rehab on his own. Doesn't matter. He's not playing in the MLB. Very small side note as well. Starling Marte, as I mentioned, made a really nice catch in that game. You know who actually made that hit? Ryan Braun, who actually beat the system. I just thought that was an interesting parallel.
Braun is a perfect guy to bring up that I was mentioning earlier, that just plays every day, and we just pretend that we don't remember that he cheated. Look,
well, he beat the system.
I'm not going to debate whether the game was more or less fun because you obviously have a point there. But MLB has decided that they're not going back on it, that you are not allowed to take those drugs. You can't do that. And so now that they're being so just lenient in this situation, it doesn't sit well with me, like I said. And if MLB is so forgive and forget, like you said, explain to me why Pete Rose isn't in the Hall of Fame.
That's a bull.
He never did. He has the most hits. He has one of the most unbreakable records in sports. He's one of the best humans to ever pick up a wooden stick and swing it, and he is not in the Hall of Fame, and he didn't cheat once. Explain to me why Shoeless Joe Jackson hit 500 in the World Series and got banned for life. How's that so forgive and forget?
Okay, fine. So those are just old, archaic, happenstance things that happen in MLB that they
wasn't even 100 years ago.
I completely agree with you. He should be in Major League in the MLB Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about that. He should be there. That I agree with you 100%. It's stupid what they're doing.
We need to move on because we got some more buyers and sellers. Okay, this team is just the most confounding team to me in all of baseball the past 3 years, and that is the Minnesota Twins, who seemingly on paper should not be relevant in any sort of way, but have 2 years ago stuck with it all the way through September till the end, till barely falling out on that wild card. This year, Julian, they're in a very similar situation. They sit half a game back of the New York Yankees for that second wild card. What should they do?
They're also half a game back of the Cleveland Indians in the AL Central, which is also really ridiculous. They should probably go for it. Why not? I mean, if you're in a situation where not only are you so close for that wild card, you have a genuine chance at winning your division outright, you have to go for it. You can't just stand pat or just sell the farm and just chicken out. The Twins, I think they're in the position where they have to go for it. I'm not sure where they were going to need that help. I didn't think they were going to be this far in. They have to go for it. There's no way they stand pat. That's weird.
I don't know.
They have to go for it.
They're one of the most confounding teams. I was serious. I legitimately don't know what to think about these guys. They have some good young pieces that could develop into something special. They have some other guys that I think are playing a little better than they'll actually ever be or end up being. I don't know what to do about these guys. I mean, look, their most recent move was bringing in Bartolo Colon, who's just been a disaster this year. I don't know how I feel about these guys, but I think if I were them, if I were in charge, I wouldn't tinker with anything. I would just let this season play out, genuinely see what you have. And if you really think you can build a playoff team around this core, go for it in this offseason. But I would not ship off any of my top 10, maybe even 20 prospects if I'm Minnesota right now, because I just don't know what I have yet, if that makes sense.
By the way, Twins getting a 6-1 win over the Yankees, by the way, this afternoon. So that's going to be a very interesting chase.
It will be. Not as if the Yankees are playing really well right now. But anyway, it will be definitely interesting to keep an eye on the Twins as we get into the later stages of the season. The last thing I want to talk about, of course I say this for last, is all of our middle-of-the-pack AL West teams. We're talking Los Angeles Angels, Texas Rangers, Seattle Mariners, all teams that people could conceive making the playoffs at some point. And maybe not the Angels this year after how bad they were last year, but the Rangers and Mariners, pretty trendy picks to make the playoffs, if not more so. The Rangers won 95 games last year. Now, I think we know that was a little bit of a fluke based on their run differential. Their record in one-run games was pretty outrageous. Mm-hmm. But they are all well behind the red-hot Houston Astros. Man, that sounded good to say. But Carlos Correa, out 6 to 8 weeks with that torn thumb ligament, had surgery today. Dallas Keuchel has been out for a while. He's due to come back, but who knows? He's already come back from the DL once and gone straight back to it earlier this season. The bullpen of Houston, who's been great all year, starting to dip a little bit, just as they have in 2015 and 2016 when they were top 5 in the league and had a drastic fallout to end the season both years in a row. So, Julian, if you're a team in the AL West hovering around 500, what's your play here?
So looking at some of these teams here, the Angels, I think they might end up being a little too far back. That being said, you have arguably the best player in the game in Mike Trout, who, starving for success in the playoffs. Has he even made the playoffs since he's how many times has he been in the playoffs since he's been in the league? Like,
I want to say twice, but I think that Angels team that spent all this money on Pujols and Hamilton and Wilson, just millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. I think they only had one 90-win season, I believe, which is sheer and utter disappointment by any means.
Absolutely. I think like with the Angels here, because of the fact you invested all that money, I mean, can you go for it? Like I said, I think they're a little too far back in that AOS. Maybe not. Maybe this is just one of those years where they just kind of have to turn the car around and just sit out, which, again, is just a shame for a guy like Mike Trout not seeing the postseason again. I think it's a little bit better off for a team like Seattle, who hasn't made the playoffs in so long. I predicted them to be a wild card team at the beginning of the year. And guys like Robinson Cano have been stepping up to the plate this year. I think this is a year where the Mariners have to make some kind of move and try to solidify themselves as a wildcard team. They still have an outside chance. As for Texas, they're in the middle of these two extremes here. As I said, the Angels, I think they should turn around. The Mariners should go for it. The Rangers, I think they're kind of more towards what the Seattle Mariners are going through right now. I think they're in need of a piece of themselves. I know in the last 10 games, 5-5, they've been kind of so-so, and they're a little farther back in that wild card chase. But I think the Mariners and the Rangers, those are teams that I think need to just add that piece to at least solidify themselves as a wild card team. The Angels, I think, maybe a little bit too far back, unless somehow they turn around from this, only 3 wins on the last 10 games, unless they somehow add some significant piece or they somehow just turn around and win a few games. I don't see them making a dent in I don't see them making a dent in the playoffs this year. So I think the Angels are going to have to turn around. The Mariners and Rangers should be the teams making moves.
I think I'm with you on the Angels. I don't see them making a run. I think there's just a couple too many teams ahead of them right now. And what really, honestly, credit where credit is due. The Angels impressed me. When Mike Trout went down, I thought they would dip down to be one of the worst teams in baseball, and they didn't. They hovered around 500 miraculously. And since he's been back, they've actually lost a few games here after the All-Star break, fallen to 4 under. But I don't know. It's hard to say, wow, you know what, we just shouldn't do anything when we have Mike Trout on our team. You know what? I think the Angels are I agree with you there. Texas is a real head scratcher because they went from all this luck last year to a lot of bad luck this year, really. Mm-hmm. And the question is when all this luck comes and goes, is how good are they on paper? Will they eventually regress, or in this case, progress to the mean? They have a very good lineup with players who have just been far too streaky for them, as in Shin-Soo Choo. Some weeks he's a hell of a hitter. Some weeks he can't hit it. He's like he's swinging a toothpick. Rougned Odor is one of the better second basemen I've seen in baseball last year at his peak. And then he has times where he can't hit over 200. So it's really a head scratcher. Same goes for Elvis Andrus. This guy is a stud sometimes. He's on the final vote for All-Star, but I know a lot of people down in Arlington and Dallas have major beef with Andrus for being wildly inconsistent as well. So I believe Texas will be buyers just because of how competitive they've been really since 2011, minus that one awful year in 2014. But I don't know. Look, they have Hamels and Darvish, who are both studs at the top of the rotation, but are both quite injury prone. Mm-hmm. Darvish's entire career coming off Tommy John. Hamels already this year an extended stint on the DL, and they have nobody after that. So if they're going to chase a starting pitcher, I would commend them for that. I think that would be a wise move. But at the same time, that's definitely a situation to keep an eye on. And for Seattle, I never bought the hype in Seattle. I was never picking them to make the playoffs, despite a lot of people just loving that Cano, Cruz, Seager meat of their lineup that has, for some reason, never fielded a team even close to making the playoffs, which is a little bit ridiculous, I think. And a lot of it is supporting cast, and a lot of it is Cruz 2 years ago was amazing, and Cano had a very off year. And then last year, Cano was fantastic, and Cruz didn't have a great year. Now they're all having pretty solid years, but Julian, can you name Seattle's starting outfield right now? Can you name who started in their outfield today?
No.
Exactly. They got Mitch Haniger, who's a rookie, I believe. They have Ben Gamble, who's been playing pretty well, but I don't know if that's a guy you're going to lean on in late September and October. You have Gerard Dyson, who's a good fielder, nice speed, but not a lot with the bat. And then they have Heredia playing from time to time. That's just like the least exciting outfield maybe in all of baseball. Certainly among teams who are either contending or on this buyers or sellers list. So I don't have a lot of faith in Seattle either. I know Correa went down, but the hole is pretty deep. It would have to be a collapse of epic proportions. And the Astros have Marwin Gonzalez, a guy stepping in who is, if you look at the league leaders, he's not in there right now, but that's only because he's missed the minimum amount of at-bats by this much. He's top 5 in the league in slugging percentage, top 5 in on-base percentage, I believe. He's having a hell of a season, really, one of the bigger all-star snubs, in my opinion. The team already had 6 all-stars. How are you going to give it to a guy who hasn't been starting every single day? But as soon as he was, I think, coming in today, 13 at-bats short of the minimum to be recognized on that league leaders. He'll be right up there by the time Correa comes back. So I don't think teams think, wow, now's the time to go jump after Houston. And in the wild card, though, if the Yankees continue to play this poorly over the next week and a half or so, if I'm Seattle, I'm 100% making a move. Sitting at 500 right now, just won a series in Houston, including a big 10-inning win, escaped major damage, real gutsy win in Houston a couple of nights ago. If I'm Seattle, I'm making a move. If I'm those other teams, I'm hesitating unless it's a starting pitcher that I'll have control over after this season for Texas. Okay. Let's see. We've got about 15 minutes left. I want to get into big deal or no deal, but before we wrap up baseball real quick, are there any teams that you are most intrigued to watch come July 31st, either in terms of making a big move to contend or making a big move shipping people out? What do you think?
Like I said, I know I think with the Jays, this might be the year where they end up selling. I'm going to be focusing on some of the attention around guys like Marco Estrada, Roberto Osuna, Donaldson. I don't see any market for Jose Bautista. I don't think he's had that great of a year for teams to want to trade him. That's a team I'm going to be looking out for. In terms of, the AL West, I think the Seattle Mariners will definitely be that team I'll be looking for. The Chicago Cubs, I think, even though they are second in their division right now, maybe they still have some other deal left to be done as well. The Yankees, who's going to go out there and land any team out there looking for starting pitching, who is going to go out there and make that trade to get Sonny Gray? That is the team I'm going to be looking. Whoever makes that move, that's going to be interesting to see. I'm just more looking out for players at this point, I should say, as opposed to certain teams. But I guess if I'm going to pick one team, Toronto, because of the fact that I still think they're not going to play too much 500 baseball this year, and maybe this is the year they at least consider, let's start shutting this down.
Yeah, I'll give my biased answer first, and that is I'm genuinely curious what the Astros feel like they need to do. Obviously, running away with things in the American League prior to this Correa injury, that is. Look, it doesn't seem like they're willing to give up much. For a lot of big names out there, I'd honestly, that's okay with me. I don't think they need to do anything drastic. I think they're set to compete for a long time as is, regardless of what they do. I would like to see them maybe go out and get a reliever, especially a lefty in the bullpen, because right now they have Tony Sipp, who does not belong in Major League Baseball on any roster. He's just throwing cheese right now. And one guy to look out for is on the other team that I'm very intrigued in, and that is I think the Astros should go get Justin Wilson. And that leads me into saying the Tigers for the opposite reasons. I'm so curious what they do because they had a good run for a long time, but clearly it's come to an end. They're just not winning ball games anymore. And they've already traded off JD Martinez, that first domino. And the question is, how many more dominoes are going to fall? I've heard Justin Verlander's name come up. And at that point, if you're getting rid of Verlander, who's been the face of your franchise from the pitching side anyway, for a number of years, what domino is too big not to fall? You got Victor Martinez, you got Upton, you got Cabrera, Kinsler. If they're willing to listen on all these guys, I'm sure people will be willing to throw down for a lot of those names because they have some established names, some established guys who can really help playoff teams down the stretch make any sort of run. Kinsler's been there. Cabrera, of course, has been there. So it will be fascinating to see what Detroit does. I can't wait to see what they do, honestly. I'm very intrigued with Detroit.
Can't wait.
Any last thoughts on MLB trades before we get into big deal or no deal?
I like trades a lot. I really want to see what the Yankees end up. The one team I know I mentioned Toronto as well, but I feel like the Yankees are not done, and I really want to see them get starting pitching. I think if that division ends up being really tight with obviously the Red Sox may end up winning, but if the Yankees do what they need to do to make the playoffs, that's going to be a fun division to follow in any case.
I don't think the MLB trade deadline is quite the NBA trade deadline, but I think now that there's a second wild card and now that there's this thing called the Golden State Warriors, we might see a change in guard. We might see a little shift in which deadline brings the most drama. I'm telling you, it's something to watch in the next few years. Nonetheless, I'm very much looking forward to this year's MLB trade deadline. All right, Julian, let's get into it. Big deal or no deal? And we'll start right here in New York with Carmelo Anthony. Just all the drama going on. First, the Knicks, they hired Steve Mills as new president of operations, replacing Phil Jackson, and he said, we would like to convince Melo to stay and rework him into our plans. Melo says, no, thank you. I'm okay. And he's been pretty clear that it's either Houston or Cleveland, which he will trade. He will give up his no trade clause. Buyout doesn't appear to be an option. And now all of a sudden, CJ McCollum's posting on Instagram, and Portland thinks they're in the mix. I'm sure they were originally approached as a third team in the Rockets deal to take on some of their potential contracts. Ryan Anderson, most notoriously. What do you make of all this Melo drama in New York?
I'm not surprised that the New York Knicks are just butchering this, because for as long as I've been a fan of NBA basketball, all I've seen is the New York Knicks butchering things and making things a massive mess. I mean, this is a guy who, Carmelo Anthony, has been a star player for them for how many years? This is a guy, in my opinion, I think should have just left New York when he had the chance, taken his money elsewhere. But, I mean, geez, this is a guy who ended up sticking it out. And we were talking about Phil Jackson kind of messing around, and he ends up not getting dealt. Now, Steve Mills tries to keep him around there. He's still there. What I'm curious about is how is this affecting his potential return? Because of the fact that the longer he stays in New York, I feel as if his value just keeps going down. And the better off a team like Houston is in terms of making a trade with the New York Knicks. And not only are the Knicks going to lose out on a star player, they're going to lose him for maybe even worse than what happened in the Paul George trade. And people in New York are going to be pissed about that. I also feel bad for CJ McCollum. As admirable as his campaign has been to lure in Carmelo Anthony to Portland, and I think that would be a pretty decent team. That's, CJ, Melo, Yusuf Nurkic as well in there.
They score a lot of points. I don't know about defensively, but they'd score a lot of points.
They would score a lot of points. In my mind, Carmelo has been trying to get to Houston, and Mike D'Antoni seems to be cool with him being there as well. We need that banana boat to come together, even if it's just like half of it, half of the banana boat, Melo and CP3. We need half of that banana there. So the Knicks are just butchering this up, and the longer they hold on to Anthony, the more Anthony's value decreases.
Well, I think once Melo gets traded to Houston and then LeBron buys the team as a player owner, then Banana Boat will start to sort itself out. But in the meantime, look, it's Steve Mills is coming into just such a horrible situation. Phil Jackson left him with a mess. And if you just put yourself in his shoes for a second, look, I mean, obviously you're going to take a job to be president of the New York Knicks. I don't care who you are. That's a job you can't turn down regardless of what shape the team is in. But once you've taken that step, now you got to think, look, they've been trying to trade this superstar before you even get there. You can't just hop in on someone else's trade talks before you've even analyzed everything that you have on your own, before you even can decide what it is you're looking for in return, what you want back, what direction you want to go with this team. Who else are you really trying to ship off, and who are you trying to bring in? Obviously, they've been trying to run the triangle. You get rid of that nonsense that hasn't worked in 2 decades, probably. But that's okay. That's also not true. But
a little bit of an exaggeration.
You see what I mean?
I get what you mean.
There's a lot of decisions to be made. So to say, okay, we need to hold off for a second on the trade talks, that makes sense logically at first. But the problem is Melo is like, no, I'm not waiting. Screw that. I'm out of here. I don't want any part of this. And now Mills, for just using basic human logic, now has no leg to stand on. And when I first heard these Rockets, Carmelo Anthony rumors, I'm thinking, oh God, like they might have to give up Eric Gordon. They might have to give up Clint Capella. Now I'm thinking, hell no, I'm not giving up those guys because this guy doesn't want to even play for you. You have no leverage in the situation. If I'm the Rockets, I'm Daryl Morey, I am standing pat. You let them make a mess because the Rockets don't need Melo until, honestly, December or even January or February. Let's be real. They can incorporate him at any time. They're in no rush. If Melo wants to come to Houston, it will get done. If I'm Daryl Morey, I am not giving up anything more than Ryan Anderson and whatever else money you need, non-guaranteed contracts to match it up, because New York has literally no leverage in the situation. It's amazing to the point it's escalated. And if a buyout is truly not an option, then they just have handled it so poorly. And it's really not even Mills' fault at this point. But he kind of played a card. He said, we're going to wait. And he needed Melo to at least keep his mouth shut for a week or two after that. And Melo didn't. And now it's just completely gone to hell. It's like playing Jenga. And not only did all the blocks fell, but the table broke and literally fell out the window. That's what happened here in New York. It's beyond repair. I don't know what direction this team goes in. I don't care. But if we're saying big deal or no deal, it's a pretty big effing deal.
Oh, it's a massive deal. And to see the Knicks, that dumpster fire rage on even more and more. Yeah, we're both in the situation where we don't give a damn about the New York Knicks. We're just watching it burn. If anything, it just sat. The only person to feel bad for in this situation is Steve Mills, because he literally just fell into this mess. The next guy in line, and he's going to end up the guy who lets Melo go for either through buyout or through peanuts. So unfortunate for him, but for the New York Knicks as a franchise, ha 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 ha, you did this to yourselves.
Okay, settle down. All right. Melo, of course, could be one of the next big stars to move east to west. What about the guy who's shipping them all away? LeBron James, reportedly upset with the Cavs front office this offseason. They have not been particularly busy, and part of that is because David Griffin, their general manager, is gone. They were not willing to pay him. Gilbert, the owner, did not want to give Griffin that mega GM contract, so he's gone. And the role, you could, of course, question the amount of role Griffin had with LeBron, how much they worked together, how involved he was in bringing him back in the first place. You could argue that. But the fact of the matter is a lot of teams, a lot of powerhouses are getting better in Cleveland has not been one of them this offseason. Do you think this is a big deal or no deal?
You know what? This is a big deal, and I know. At first I kind of thought, LeBron at it again, complaining about how his roster is not good enough, and a ton of people are going about it the same way. But there's something interesting about this offseason. David Griffin was doing his job, and it didn't seem as if, people were really confused as to why he was being let go. And there were rumblings going around that he was let go just as the Cavs were seemingly close to bringing in Paul George, who, for a team that could have, is likely going to be a lock for the Eastern Conference Finals and a lock for the NBA Finals to play Golden State, they could use all the reinforcements they could get, and I don't think anyone would have faulted the Cleveland Cavaliers for dealing for Paul George. So for that deal to fall through and for the GM to get blocked, it's an extremely peculiar situation. And I think even Kyrie Irving yesterday had to answer questions about that. Sports Illustrated, they had some event last night, and he was saying, hey, you know what, we're going through a pretty peculiar offseason. If you're LeBron James, who, is already under a banking, a lot of attention on him, but he could be going in 2018, and there's rumblings going around to be jumping to LA. I saw some story on Twitter about how the Philadelphia 76ers may have enough room to lure him in, and maybe he might want to spearhead a young team there. LeBron, we're a summer away from LeBron potentially having another quote unquote decision. And home in Cleveland right now, it doesn't seem as if the Cavaliers are giving him all that incentive to want to stay. So this is a big deal. If you're a Cleveland fan, if you're an NBA fan in general, you're a LeBron fan, this is a massive deal. I get it. He's complained about his roster before, but I mean, have you seen Golden State? Have you seen all the players they have? Kevin Durant ain't no joke. Kevin Durant shot that three in LeBron's face in game 3 to win the game like a bad man. Like, they have too many weapons over there. So if I'm Cleveland and I realize, you know what, hey, man, like we're going to be in the NBA Finals, but we still have to find a way to match up with Golden State, you got to find a way to improve your roster. So I'm not going to blame LeBron this time for crying for help in this situation. This is a big deal.
You think there's any legitimate chance, like even like greater than 2% chance that he leaves Cleveland ever again?
I think if he's going to leave because he has a house in LA and he spends time there, I think the Los Angeles Lakers would be that team. But even at that, like, he plays for the Lakers, that team, I mean, as LeBron could virtually almost go anywhere and make a team a contender. But are the Los Angeles Lakers good enough to beat Golden State? I don't think so. Does he go, like I saw San Antonio as another name. That could, in terms of talent, I think he might have a better chance there playing in San Antonio. That being said, that was also pre-Chris Paul, and Chris Paul's in Houston right now. So, I don't know how that team plays with LeBron and Kawhi in San Antonio. Is that better than Golden State? I don't know. I think in terms of keeping up his finals appearances, he's better off staying in Cleveland. And it doesn't look as if the Eastern Conference is going to improve to the point where, wow, he really has to worry about Boston. Wow, Washington. Damn, Milwaukee and Giannis Antetokounmpo are really ready to make that finals run. Nah, none of those teams are really ready to make that challenge to dethrone Cleveland. So I think for LeBron, if he's in the interest of winning, he is better off staying in Cleveland. But if that's not necessarily as big of a priority and he kind of wants to make it work in LA, I think LA is as good of a place as any, if not the best place for him.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any question now more than ever maybe that Cleveland is going to make the finals. But the issue now is dethroning Golden State, not Eastern Conference enemies. And clearly Cleveland doesn't have what it takes with their current roster, and they did not make any changes to it. So I get why LeBron is frustrated. I also question how much he has to do with all the moves that put him in the situation they are in the first place, because if I'm GM of the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm not making any moves without running it by LeBron first. I think it's pretty much common sense at this point that he's the reason that David Blatt was run out of town and they brought in Ty Lue. He wanted a point guard earlier. They brought in Darren Williams. They clearly listened to him. So I think blaming it all on them, which it may be taking this out of context because maybe that's not what he's doing, but I think if he were blaming it on all of them, that would be absurd because they've been listening to him just as much as they've been listening to themselves for any moves that they've been motivated to make, in my opinion. I don't know if that's fact, but I think there's a pretty good chance that that is what's going on. So I think for him to be upset at the front office when they have been answering to him ever since he got back there seems a little premature to me. But the fact that they got rid of Griffin is what makes me take a step back on that. Because if Griffin was the one listening to him and they got rid of Griffin, that would make a little more sense. But in terms of him actually leaving, I don't see it happening. I definitely don't see him going to the Lakers. Because if he's going to leave Cleveland, when he had this whole campaign, Cleveland or nowhere, I'm coming back home, all of that, if he's going to leave again, he's not going to go to the Lakers, who have not a very good chance at all at winning a ring, at least in their current state. If they get Paul George and Russell Westbrook, yeah, I guess we can talk. But until then, I'm not entertaining this LeBron to LA nonsense. I think it's absolutely absurd. Speaking of the Lakers, Las Vegas Summer League champs and MVP as well, and that would be none other than Mr. Lonzo Ball. Julian, big deal or no deal?
Fortunately for Lonzo Ball, this is not a big deal. I get it. He had an outstanding time at Summer League, and, we were looking at his shoes, but at the end of the day, Summer League. And, I mean, let's take a look at some of the MVPs dating back to, all right, fine. Let's go back to about the last 10 years, 11 years or so. 2016 Summer League MVP, Tyus Jones. Kyle Anderson in 2015 from San Antonio. Glenn Rice in 2014 for the Wizards. Jonas Valanciunas in 2013 for Toronto. Josh Selby in 2012, tied with Damian Lillard. Actually, you know what? That's actually a pretty good name. John Wall in 2010, Blake Griffin in 2009, Jared Bayless 2008, Nate Robinson 2007, Randy Foye 2006. Okay, fine. So 2012, 2010, 2009, we have some pretty good names. And hey, let's throw Nate Robinson 2007 as well. But anyway, the point of this was this is because you are the Summer League doesn't necessarily translate into an outstanding career. So for us to kind of shower praise on Lonzo Ball, fine. You woke up from that first game where you kind of were just stumbling everywhere, or your big baller brand shoes. Now all you need to do is just wear KD, wear Kobe Bryant shoes and Harden shoes. And maybe you see some Steph Curry shoes as well, and all of a sudden you're going to have triple doubles on the score. But my man, you got to play some good regular season games before we really start falling into that. That being said, I'm a big fan of that little punch pass he had in one of those games in Summer League. Some really good instincts. But unfortunately, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I do not think it's a big deal. Look, you bring up the list of former MVPs. I think that's worthwhile bringing up. Damian Lillard seems to be like the biggest name on there, and if
John Wall
ended up being Damian Lillard, I would be genuinely a little surprised. I'm not sure he'll be that good, but I think Lakers would be disappointed if he were to end up being similar to Damian Lillard because I think he's the next Magic Johnson.
Hold up, you said Damian Lillard was the biggest name. You remember John Wall's on that list.
Okay, I'm talking Las Vegas MVPs.
Fair enough.
Okay.
No, it's cool.
But look, the same people who are all high on Lonzo Ball winning Summer League MVP were the same ones who were saying that Summer League is pointless when he went 2 for 15 in his debut. The fact of the matter is you can't have it one way or the other. And winning MVP isn't a bad thing by any means. It's probably a good sign, if anything. But is it a big deal? No, it's not a big deal. Let's see. We are well past an hour now, Julian, so I'm going to skip a couple categories here. It's National Hot Dog Day. Now, my Twitter feed is blowing up right now on whether a hot dog is or isn't a sandwich. What do you think?
Wow. I'm surprised this debate has raged on as long as it has, because I, for a few times, have, asked that question to people on Twitter and on Facebook, but I don't think I've necessarily expressed my opinion about whether a hot dog is in fact a sandwich. So you know what? I think this is the first time I'm ever going to be on record about a hot dog being a sandwich. It is a sandwich. It's in this piece of bread that is kind of, just it's a sandwich. Like, I get it. You people are gonna look at the definition and be like, oh, you need like this. You need two pieces of bread, kind of, enveloping, a bit of meat here and there. You technically have that in a hot dog, and I mean, like, you have the actual. Hold on a second. I mean, if we're gonna be literal here, the actual meat itself is the sandwich, but the idea of a hot dog in a bun, which envelops the actual hot dog itself, technically. And what about if you are struggling? You're a college student. You're hoping for a whole bunch of stuff on that free 99, and you have to buy like regular sandwich bread, and you have to put hot dogs in that. That's technically a sandwich there. Or hey, maybe you have to use those sandwich baguettes, and then you stuff in your hot dog there. I think that's a sandwich. I'm willing to debate that the hot dog debate. A hot dog sandwich debate is a bit more complex than we give credit to. But for all intents and purposes of this show, yes, it is a sandwich.
This might be the most wrong you've ever been about anything in the history of the Face-Off.
Oh, come on!
Is not a sandwich.
Come on!
The definition of a sandwich is two pieces of bread, and it comes in a bun. Therefore, if you're overthinking it, it's not a sandwich. I'm telling you. It's also even more than a literal thing. It's like it's a gut thing, and it's a hot dog. It's its own category. It does not belong in the sandwich category whatsoever. If a place served both, I guarantee you the menu would separate both of those items. A hot dog is not a sandwich. You will not convince me otherwise.
Well, fine. I guess my efforts have been thwarted. I still think it's a sandwich, and I don't think you'll convince me otherwise either. But I think we've disagreed on far more ridiculous topics.
Probably. But this is definitely up there. Julian, another fun episode as always. Anything else you want to say to the people before we sign off?
Shout out to actually, wow. This is usually I have like 12 other different things to shout out right now. But follow the boy at JKA Mackenzie. Actually, there is a place I would like to shout out. Shout out to this music blog I'm currently contributing to, Under the Influence of Music. You can check that out, Utiom, UTIOM.com. We are based on Medium right now. Go check that out, my man. Go check that out. That's the only thing I got to shout out right now.
Guys should definitely look into that as well. Follow me and Julian on Twitter. I am at JakeLapin_MLB. Look out for me tweeting, because coming up is the trade deadline, and I will be tweeting away. Again, as always, we have these YouTube lives now. You can always go back and watch them on my YouTube channel, Jake Lapin. Search my name. You should find me pretty easily. Also, Mixcloud, iTunes, audio versions are coming at you. You can hear that intro music, because we know we all love that intro music.
Mm-hmm.
Julian, same time next week, shall we?
Same time next week. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Guys, always a pleasure. Have a great night and a great week. We'll see you next time.